morning, March 20th. Okay, let's start off, and you can you can pull the verse up. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. I'm doing that.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, the second verse, 18th chapter. Second chapter, 18th verse, and we're on the advent of Lord Krishna. A very auspicious section here, and we can actually just go to the translation, just for the interest of time, go into that. And right now we're in the section where, just very briefly, where Lord Krishna is appearing, and he's right before he's appearing, he's coming in the heart of Vasudeva and Devaki. And so we're reading from this section. And I thought this was a very beautiful section because there's so much we can take from it and apply to our life in terms of bringing Krishna into our life. So we'll speak on that. So let's see the translation. Thereafter, accompanied by plenary expansions, the fully opulent Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all auspicious for the entire universe, was transferred from the mind of Vasudeva to the mind of Devaki. Having thus been initiated by Vasudeva, became beautiful by carrying Lord Krishna, the original consciousness for everyone, the cause of all causes within the core of her heart, just as the east becomes beautiful by carrying the rising moon. I'll read that again. Thereafter, accompanied by, if you just go up, Prabhu. Yes. Therefore, accompanied by the plenary expansions, the fully opulent Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all auspicious for the universe, was transferred from the mind of Vasudeva to the mind of Devaki. Devaki, having thus been initiated by Vasudeva, became beautiful by carrying Lord Krishna, the original consciousness for everyone, the cause of all causes, within the core of her heart, just as the east becomes beautiful by carrying the rising moon. We have purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. As indicated here by the word manasta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was transferred from the core of Vasudeva's heart, mind or heart to the core of the heart of Devaki. We should note carefully that the Lord was transferred to Devaki not by the ordinary way for a human being, but by diksha, initiation. Thus, the importance of initiation is mentioned here. Unless one is initiated by the right person, who always carries within his heart the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot acquire the power to carry the Supreme Godhead within the core of one's own heart. The word Achutamsham is used because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Sad Ashvarya Purna, full in opulences of wealth, strength, fame, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation. The Supreme Godhead is never separated from his personal opulences. As stated in the Brahma Samhita 539, the Lord is always situated with all his plenary expansions, such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha. Therefore, the word Achutamsham is specifically used here, signifying that the Lord is always present with his plenary expansions and opulences. There's no need to think of the Lord artificially as yogis do. Reference to Gita 12:13:1. Yogis meditate on the Supreme Person within the mind. For a devotee, however, the Lord is present, and his presence need only be awakened through initiation by a bona fide spiritual master. The Lord did not need to live within the womb of Devaki, for his presence within the core of her heart was sufficient to carry him. One is here forbidden to think that Krishna was begotten by Vasudeva within the womb of Devaki, and that she carried the child within her womb. When Vasudeva was sustaining the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart, he appeared just like the glowing sun, whose shining rays are always unbearable and scorching to the common man. The form of the Lord situated in the pure, unalloyed heart of Vasudeva is not different from the original form of Krishna. The appearance of the form of Krishna anywhere, and specifically within the heart, is called Dhamma. Dhamma refers not only to Krishna's form, to his name, his form, his quality, and his paraphernalia. Everything becomes manifest simultaneously. Thus, the eternal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with full potencies was transferred from the mind of Vasudeva to the mind of Devaki, exactly as the setting sun rays are transferred to the full moon rising in the east. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, entered the body of Devaki from the body of Vasudeva. He was beyond the conditions of the ordinary living entity. When Krishna is there, it is to be understood that all his plenary expansions, such as Narayan, and incarnations like Lord Nrsimha and Varaha are with him, and they're not subject to the conditions of material existence. In this way, Devaki became the residence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is one without a second and the cause of all creation. Devaki became the residence of the Absolute Truth, because she was within the house of Kamsa, she looked just like a suppressed fire or like misused education. When fire is covered by walls or a pot is kept in a jug, the illuminating rays of the fire cannot be very much appreciated. Similarly, misused knowledge, which does not benefit the people in general, is not very much appreciated. So Devaki was kept within the prison walls of Kamsa's palace, and no one can ever see her transcendental beauty, which resulted from her conceiving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Commenting upon this verse, Sri Veera Raghavacharya writes, Vasudeva Devaki Jairator Hridayar Bhagavat Sambandha. The Supreme Lord's entrance into the womb of Devaki from the heart of Vasudeva was a heart-to-heart relationship. I'll read that last line again because I think it's very important. The Supreme Lord's entrance into the womb of Devaki from the heart of Vasudeva was a heart-to-heart relationship. Okay, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Let's go into the verse itself. Just say some invocation prayers. Om Agyantamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpa Turbasya Kripa Sandubhyevacha Patita Nam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so nice to be with everyone here, seeing some familiar faces and seeing some new faces as well around the room. If you're on video, that's always appreciated. If not, that is totally okay as well. So this verse, Anand Bihar Prabhu asked me to pick a verse, and I was looking through this section, and this verse really stood out to me, the purport. And it's a very beautiful purport that Srila Prabhupada writes, talking about the heart-to-heart relationship that Vasudeva and Devaki have also with Krishna, culminating in the appearance of Krishna within their family. And there's so many beautiful lessons from here, and I'll bring out a few lessons and few points that I found that were salient and that we could discuss. And like Prabhu mentioned, we want to keep it engaging. You can use the chat even if you have some thoughts. You can jump in at the end. We'll open it up for some questions, some comments, some reflections. We don't want this to become just a lecture, but something that we're all learning from and that we're growing from, and that's dynamic in living. So that's really important. The topic for me that came up, and the topic I want to speak about, is the heart. This verse really speaks about the heart, the importance of heart-to-heart relationships, and the relationship that we have with Krishna. And it's the word uses manana in the verse, and that refers to the mind, but actually, and you see how Srila Prabhupada translated it, actually refers to the heart, because the heart is the deepest part of the mind, the core of our mind. Where we have these phrases that we use sometimes, that it really hurt my heart, or my heart is saying, or follow your heart, because this is the deeper aspect, the emotional aspect of our existence. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I wanted to start off with just speaking about, Prabhupada mentions the connection of Vasudeva and Devaki, of one of initiation. And I wanted to talk first about the importance of gurus, and the importance of not just gurus, diksha gurus, but shiksha gurus, and how that's so important, and how that actually helps our spiritual development. Because he mentions that a person who carries Krishna within their heart can actually give you Krishna. And this is so important. There's 3 types of gurus, and I'm referencing from a wonderful book, Yoga in the Dark Night of the Soul. It's a wonderful book that I would recommend. But the author mentions that there are 3 types of gurus that we acknowledge in our Vedic movement and parampara. And all of these help us grow. And I wanted to bring this up. One is nature. So nature all around us and our environment helps us grow greatly. We can see that from our environment, whether it's our family, friends, etc., but also our greater environment, the nature around us. We can learn so many different lessons. There's different stories in the Shastra that are given around nature. For example, from the trees, we can learn tolerance, how to be tolerant. From even a honeybee, for example, we can learn to extract the nectar. There's a difference between a honeybee and a housefly. The fly always goes toward the trash, the rubbish, but the honeybee is focused on exerting the getting the nectar and leaving the rest. So we can see that. We can see others' good qualities. We can only see the good in situations and leave the negative. So we can learn from the honeybee. And then also we can learn from things like water even. Water can teach us fluidity, adaptability, so many different things that water can teach us. So these are just 3 examples. If you have any examples that you can think of, write them into the chat. There's so many. When you look around in nature, we look at the grass, being humbler than a blade of grass, is given in the Shikshashtakam by Mahaprabhu, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he talks about that. So we can see so many different examples in nature. Then a second type of guide is Paramatma. This is the inner guide, that the super soul, that's Krishna and within our heart, who's guiding us, who's relating to us, and is really guiding our activities, and is a constant witness to our activities. And thirdly, we have a caring mentor, which is the guru, which could be a diksha guru or it could be a shiksha guru. It could be either or, any of those. And shiksha gurus actually are also very important. Sometimes we emphasize on diksha gurus. The shiksha gurus are ones that could be even peers, or ones that are a little bit more senior to us, that are helping us, that are nurturing us, that are supporting us on a day-to-day basis when it comes to our spiritual development. So all 3 are important. And why are gurus so important? Srila Prabhupada makes this point in the purport that one needs to find someone who is spiritually advanced. Why are they so important? Well, as Nandaprabhu mentioned, I do some leadership coaching, leadership development work, and we study psychology as well. We can learn from some of those examples. And also, let's look at some examples in the chat. I see some here. The moon changes phases, but remains the same moon. Vajrabihari Prabhu, thank you. It's a wonderful example. Jamuna Jaya Prabhu, the ocean, its depths are a lesson. Yes, that's such a good point. Vajrabihari Prabhu, the sun makes distinctions and purifies all. Without making distinctions, purifies all. Absolutely. So many good examples there that we can learn, qualities that we can start to embody and practice. So why is this so important? Why is it so important to have behavior that we can have modeled for us? Well, there's a study done in the 1960s, and I wanted to bring this up very briefly, by a psychologist named Albert Bandura. He did a study at Stanford University in the 1960s, and he found that, this is something that we know, very common knowledge now, but in the 1960s, this was a little bit more interesting. He found that children learn through modeling very greatly, and it really impacted them. And he did a study where he had a Bobo doll, a clown doll. Kind of funny, but he had this doll, and he had an adult interacting with this doll. And this is done in the 1960s, as mentioned, at Stanford University. And he had a child watching. He had different children watching this interaction between this adult and the doll. And they had the adults sometimes show signs of aggression toward the doll. And they noticed that, and when they studied this over many years, they found a very clear correlation between children who were exposed to seeing aggression toward the doll and aggression developing in the children as they became older adolescents and even as young children, as toddlers, as they got older. And this is where sort of the theories around learning and modeling behavior really came root in psychology. We learn from our environment, and we learn actually from our primary caregivers and our parents originally. This is we see when we were first born, we learn from them and learn how to behave, how to act, how to interact with each other. And so from a spiritual perspective, it's so important as well. These three types of gurus help us in understanding what's the proper behavior. What is some of the potential that I can achieve when it comes to my spiritual potential? And how do I do that? And fundamentally, the point that I want to make here is that life is an emotional experience. It's not just an intellectual experience. It's an emotional experience. And therefore, connecting with people in relationship is so vital because we're learning from each other. From our interactions, we're learning from each other. And this is where, even in the Shastra, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Koi, Lava Matra, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. That even by a moment's association with a pure devotee, it can change our life. One can attain all success. And I never fully understood this when I was growing up in the movement, but I understand this now, looking back, that actually when we're interacting with other people, we're actually developing qualities that they have. We're taking on qualities that they have. Going back to this experiment of the Bobo dolls, these children were watching this behavior, and just through watching it, they started to model it in their own life. And so we need proper Sangha and association and gurus in all three facets that are helping us in this way, developing these divine qualities, these Brahminical qualities that will help us on our path to developing bhakti and to inviting Krishna into our life. This is very important. And why is the heart so important? It's not just, and I made this point, but we're not just talking about the physical organ of the heart. We're talking about the emotional heart, the emotional experience that we go through. This is why Bhakti yoga is called the yoga of devotion, the yoga of the heart. Right? The intellect is important, but it's deeper than that. It's an emotional experience, an emotional connection. And if we think about it, everything in our life that we hold precious, whether it's relationships, our health, whether it's things that bring us joy, our family, Sangha that we have, we're all emotionally tied to it. It's tied to our heart. Krishna wants our heart. So this is the point that I wanted to make around when Srila Prabhupada mentions the point around initiation. He's speaking toward us developing a relationship with people that can help us grow spiritually. And we have these three types of mentors: nature, the environment around us. We have this connection to Paramatma, and then we have the caring mentors in our lives. We can have many of them, whether they're Diksha or Shiksha gurus. And through their Sangha, through their association, we're actually getting pulled upward. There's a quote that I've shared in some of our talks before by a speaker named Jim Rohn, and he says that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This is because we're constantly, getting the qualities of those that we spend time with. As they say, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. So those are some examples there. And I want you to think here a little bit of another checkpoint here. What's the kindest thing someone has done for you? Thinking about that. I was actually at an event and someone asked me this question, and it really touched me. They asked me and they really caught me off guard. They said, you practice a spiritual path, and I'm curious, what's the kindest thing someone's ever done for you? And I reflected on it, and I realized that some of the interactions I've had with so many of the Vaishnavas who have guided me have really touched me, and have actually helped me. And even just a few of those interactions in my life have been some of the most deepest and meaningful experiences in my life that have moved me forward, that have helped bring Krishna into my life more and more, into my heart. So the point here is that we need to recognize that. And we see the example also in Shastra is given of Narada and Valmiki. I'll talk about it very briefly. But Valmiki was the compiler of the Ramayana, or the writer of it. We know Valmiki's Ramayana. And many folks don't know that he was actually, and we know this in our tradition, that he was actually a dacoit in his previous life, if you will, but before he became a sage. And he was a highway robber, and he was merciless. He would kill, and he would terrorize others, and he was doing so many different things. And just by his association with Narada, it's a whole story. But Narad Muni, who was very enchanting, very charming, very mystical, came into his life and really transformed him. And he became this sage that we now worship and we learn from, and who ended up compiling the Ramayana, actually. And so we can see this example of how the association, even just a moment of association with a pure devotee or with an exalted or advanced spiritualist, can move us forward so deeply in our spiritual journey. It can be a life-changing experience, and it can be a pivotal point where we shift. And we have so many examples in our movement. I'm sure folks on the call, all of you on the call, could all share times. We have so many stories that I've heard where someone's walking and they saw a devotee and they were distributing a book, or they came just by to the temple and they got a plate of prasad, and whatever the interaction was, and they had such a sweet interaction with someone that it helped them move forward in their spiritual life. And maybe they started coming around more, maybe not, but it was a pivotal experience for them, potentially. And the deeper point here also is that, and Radhanath Swami says this so often, why is life a fundamentally emotional experience? Why is this? Is the reason is that we fundamentally want to be loved and to love others. There's really two things that we're doing in life that we're looking for. It's our primary motivation, to love and to be loved by others. And we can see this warped in the world in so many different ways, whether it's because we're not getting these needs met. We look for many things in the world, such as power, domination, significance, importance. And this can result in so many different things that happen. Whether it's greed, manipulation, corruption, cheating. We're looking for love, though, ultimately. That's the baseline when it comes to what we're looking for. And so being able to develop our capacity to love, again, heart-to-heart connection, developing our heart is so vital. And this is the point that I'll be talking about a lot today. Developing our capacity of heart and our capacity to love unconditionally. Unconditionally love ourselves, others, and then we develop also a relationship with Krishna in that regard. In our society, it sometimes feels like, and you can all correct me if I'm wrong, but we have schools for the intellect. We focus on that so much. We have schools for our body. We have many different. In New York, I see every block there's a gym or a yoga studio nowadays. They have so many schools for our body. But I feel like we don't have schools for our heart. I feel like often we don't have schools for our heart. And we're lacking this. We often default to what we saw. Again, going back to that experiment in the 1960s, to what we saw in our early environment. And that's great because we might have seen many good things, but maybe we didn't see some good things, right? When it came to love and how to behave and whatnot. And so how do we move forward in a way that we can grow, actually? And we need to develop our capacity to love. Again, we have schools for intellect and we have schools for the body, but we don't often have schools for the heart. And Bhakti Yoga is a school for the heart. That's what it's really about. And often I feel like in our society, we often put a premium on developing our ego through our intellect, through our studies, through getting very smart, through going through great universities and schools. It's a focus there instead of focusing on actually developing our capacity, our heart capacity. And we're not saying that intellect is not important. And I also want to make this point as well. It's not that it's not important. Bhakti is all about wise love, right? It's a balance of bringing the philosophy, which is our head, and then we have our heart as well. But we know that when love is not, there's no wisdom to love, it can become reckless and just sentimental. So we need some grounding there. But at the same time, we should know that at the end of the day, fundamentally, life is an emotional experience. Our spiritual journey is an emotional experience as well, and it boils down to the heart. And this is why Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of the heart. So this is what I wanted to share, and I actually wanted to bring some studies in when we speak about this heart-to-heart relationship or the heart. There's some interesting things. I mentioned we have some sayings. My heart is saying, or follow your heart, or that comment you made the other day really hurt my heart. Right, it really hurt my heart. And we know the presence of the Atma and the Paramatma is within the heart of every living being. It's interesting in science, this is a really nice point that I saw. I was reading a book, and there's an institute called the Heart Math Institute. And they did some studies, and what they found is that often when we think of the neurons, we think of neurons in just the brain. This is the common conception. Oh, I might lose some neurons, or, etc. We have neurons in the brain, neuroplasticity. That is very important, and that's there. But also what they found, it's very interesting, the Heart Math Institute, they did some studies around the heart, and they found that there's actually many, many neurons in the heart as well. And the heart, the physical heart organ, communicates with the brain just more than even the brain communicates with the heart, actually. It's very interesting. And this is they can measure this, and this is called heart rate variability, and it actually impacts our resilience towards stress, our emotional state, our mental health, our spiritual health, as you can be seen. So there's some correlation there. There's some studies done around this. You can look it up, but there's definitely some correlation that we have, that there's different centers of being even within our body. So when we're speaking about the heart, yes, we're speaking about the emotional aspect of our life, but there's actually some scientific tie to some of the physical aspect as well, with some of this research that's been done. So it's very interesting work. Now, when we speak about, we have the physical heart, but let's speak about the emotional heart. What qualities are we talking about? And these are things that we can develop. And I want to go into more of a practical place here. We've been speaking about some more of the theory. Well, some of the qualities of the heart, something that came to my mind, I was thinking of the divine qualities that Krishna talks about in the Gita. Some of the divine qualities he talks about in the last part of the Gita. And some that came to my mind were compassion, honesty, humility, empathy, resilience, the capacity to love others, joy, clarity, simplicity. We know simplicity is a quality of the heart as well. Authenticity as well, vulnerability, being vulnerable with others, courage, which is a very important quality, courage as well, and curiosity. All these are qualities of the heart. And to the degree that we're feeling these qualities on a day-to-day basis is sort of to the degree that we're actually connecting with Krishna, in my perspective. And we may not always be experiencing these qualities. This is a fact. But the more we can develop them, we're developing these heart-centered qualities, actually. And we want to make sure that we're focusing on this. This is a very important point. Sometimes we are in our, and I say this a lot for those of you who've heard me speak, I share this so often that often in our traditions, sometimes in our temples and communities, sometimes we focus so much on the other things that we're doing, the service that we're doing, which is so important. Obviously, we want to have our sadhana, so important. At the same time, we want to add this in. We want to add in developing these qualities, developing our sadhana, this practice that we're building, because this will sustain the rest of our spiritual life as well. It'll sustain our interactions with others. It'll sustain our relationships. It'll sustain our health. Again, I mentioned resilience, our emotional state, etc. We want to work on this as well, because it will actually bring a lot of joy to our spiritual practice or our spiritual sangha. And we know this. We talk about even the qualities of the soul as Satchitananda, eternal, conscious, or full of knowledge, and full of joy. Right? This is not just an abstraction, but it's a practical experience that we need to develop in our life on a day-to-day basis. We need to develop this. What's the danger of not developing this? We know the benefits. We talked about the benefits, how it can enhance our sadhana, can enhance our sangha, our relationships. But there's a very dangerous situation that can occur when we're not practicing this. When we're not cultivating our heart space, actually, and the point here is all actually good qualities get centered through the heart. And when we're not practicing and developing our heart and the love within our heart and our connection to Krishna in that way and to every living being, then everything that we have can be potentially misused. It can be a zero, a big fat zero, or even a negative. And we see this. And for example, strength without compassion, when we have strength but we don't have compassion, it becomes brutality. It becomes domination. It becomes chaos. And it can be very frightful. We see this situation in the world with wars and so many things that are occurring because we have all this weaponry, we have all these things, and we have this great ego that we've developed, as mentioned, through so many years of reinforcement. And we go into the world, and when we don't have the empathy to really balance our decision making, then we can get out of balance. And we can start to create a lot of negative situations in the world. And we shouldn't think that because we're not government leaders, and we're not politicians, and we're not Fortune 500 CEOs, that we can't make a difference. We can absolutely make a difference. And our sangha and our impact in our community, in our circle, in our spiritual life makes a huge difference, actually. And we can be the light of change. We shouldn't think that, the news, sometimes we look at the news and the news is terrible, of course, and there's different things going on in the world. But we shouldn't let that change how we can show up in the world and do our little part. And we start by changing ourselves. We start by changing ourselves, and then we can move into actually changing the world. Too often we're focusing on changing the world, and we all need to work on ourselves, actually. Very much so. And I speak from experience. We need to all change ourselves. And so this is very important. Developing a sense of cultivating this heart space and empathy while we work on developing our strengths. And this centers all our good qualities, whether it's our gifts, our strength, our intellect, all of that is great. It's wonderful. Our body, our mind can all then be used in service and in the right way. And we'll know how to balance in every situation. So this is a very key point. And when we center around heart qualities, this is very attractive to Krishna, actually. Krishna is looking for our heart. He's not looking for how many verses we have memorized or how many rounds we chanted for 50 years. That's wonderful. But Krishna is also looking at the quality of our heart. He's looking at that. And I want to make this point that Krishna actually reciprocates not with the quality of our, he doesn't reciprocate with the quantity of our knowledge, but the quality of our love. He reciprocates not with the quantity of our knowledge, but with the quality of our love. Let's reflect here, also another reflection point. And I wanted to add some of these in so we can think about this in our life as well. Not that we hear this and we move forward. What's the quality of our love for others and for Krishna? How are we developing these qualities? It's a reflection point to think about, and we can open it up at the end, obviously, for some thoughts and reflections. But what's the quality of our love? We know in the Gita, Krishna talks about in the fifth chapter, 18th verse, of what's the true sage? Who's a true spiritualist? Vidya Vinaya Sampane Gavihastani Sunicheva Swapakesha Pandita Samadarshana. And these are the qualities. Sorry, my Sanskrit's not so good, but the point is that how are we seeing every being with equal vision? This is really key. And this is the reflection point that I'd love to leave you all with. Now, I have a few minutes actually, so I'll just wrap up here. We talked about a couple things. We talked about the importance of Guru and the relationship between Vasudeva and Devaki of initiation, but more of this, the relationship of this care that happens between Vaishnava relationships, spiritual relationships, and how we have multiple opportunities to create this, whether it's through looking at examples in nature and learning to develop certain qualities we can see all around us in our environment, in nature, in our those around us. We have the relationship with Paramatma. It's the intuition that we have within the heart of Super Soul, right? That's also within the heart as well. And then we have the caring mentors, Diksha, Shiksha Gurus, that we can develop intimate relationships with all our questions, our confusions, our strengths and weaknesses, our pain points, and develop these relationships of openness. You talked about that. We talked about some of the studies around modeling and how studies were done in psychology of seeing how we learn behavior through modeling others who are doing things, and how we actually learn to process the world around us through that. And so why it's so important that we have great models, role models for all of us, and how the association of a Vaishnava or advanced spiritualist, even for a couple moments, can be a life-changing experience, actually. And we talked about the example of Narada and Valmiki, and then also how it's so important to cultivate our heart space. We see Devaki and Vasudev, they've cultivated that, and they invite Krishna into their space. We have schools for the intellect, that's there. We have schools for the body, that's there, but we don't also often have schools for the heart in our society. And I think that's changing, and that's wonderful. But we need more of that, because it's a minority at this point. It's not so much there. And how we need to really focus on developing this. And I'll just end with a story and a couple points here. Our effort is so important. We can have our sadhana, we're praying. Also want to put in the effort to develop these qualities. Also want to put an effort in to develop this sambandha with Krishna. It's so important. Last time I was speaking, we were sharing the difference between effort and mercy, and how they're both two sides of the spiritual coin, if you will, of us growing. The story that came to my mind when I was thinking about that, and I wanted to share today, was Arjuna and Krishna. And it's one of my favorite pastimes of showing that we have to also put in that effort. We have to put in effort to develop. We can't just expect that things will just manifest. Arjuna was, the story that I wanted to share from the Mahabharata was when Arjuna's son Abhimanyu was killed by many of the Kaurava warriors. And he was killed in an unfair way, because he was ganged up on and ambushed, and the person who was mainly responsible was Jayadratha, who was a warrior named Jayadratha. And when Arjuna heard that his son was killed, he was so besides himself, and he made a vow that I will kill, by the next day, by sunset, I'll kill Jayadratha or I'll kill myself. And he made this very strong vow in the Mahabharata. I think this was on the 14th day of battle, 13th, 14th day of battle. And when the next day happened, when the Kaurava army heard this, they were besides themselves. They were very nervous. And so they developed every level of protection, as you can imagine, for Jayadratha. And they thought, okay, you know what? If he doesn't accomplish his mission, then he'll actually kill himself, and that'll be such a big benefit to the Kaurava mission, because Arjuna was the greatest warrior on that side. And so that would be such a big blow to the Pandavas, and it would be a big win for the Kauravas, and it might shift the whole battle, the whole war and the whole battle. But it's not that and the point that I want to make is that when Arjuna woke up the next day to go to battle, he fought a battle like no one has ever seen before. He was a man possessed. And it's not that he thought, Krishna is my charioteer, he's my driver, Krishna will just take the reins, and he will just save me. But Arjuna was really putting in effort. And in the Mahabharata, it's really nicely shared, and in great detail, it's talked about how hard he was working to get to Jayadratha, to kill him. And he had to work through so many different armies and chakra formations, and his horses got tired. And the interesting thing is, the whole time Krishna was giving him guidance. Okay, stop here. Okay, the horses need water. Okay, now press the attack. Okay, now pull back a little bit, take a break. At every point, Krishna was giving him guidance. And we see this in our life. through the guidance that Krishna gives us, and through also the guidance that we get, which is also an extension of Krishna through the devotees and through our caring mentors. And at every point he was giving him guidance. But Arjuna had to also put the work in. He had to put the work in. And ultimately, yes, it's up to Krishna. And we see the story, Arjuna actually, he doesn't make it to Jayadratha in time. It starts to look like the sun is about to set. And it starts to get really dicey there. And Kauravas start to celebrate, actually. They start to get very happy that looks like Arjuna needs to kill himself and fulfill his vow. And he's very close, but he's not there fully in terms of getting to Jayadratha. And then Krishna comes in, and this is where the mercy side comes in, of effort and mercy. And Krishna, he takes the Sudarshan Chakra and he covers the sun. And it looks like the sun has set. And when that happens, all the Kauravas, they jump and they yell in glee, and they lower their defenses because they think the sun is set, Arjuna is going to kill himself. And at this point, Krishna gives him guidance and says, aim your arrow right at his head and take care of him. And Arjuna does so. But the reason I shared this story is that both are important. Sometimes we're relying on mercy, but we also have to put our effort in. And in this case, it's not just our chanting, but our service, our sangha, and also our sadachar, developing these qualities. And this is the key when it comes to our spiritual life. This is the key. It was recently Gaur Purnima, just a few days back, and the verse that was coming to my mind was from the Shikshashtakam, where the opening line is Cheto Darpana Marjanam. And really, Mahaprabhu is immediately speaking to how we need to cleanse the mirror of the mind, of the heart. We need to cleanse the mirror for the seed of bhakti to actually grow. We need to cleanse that mirror. And this is the work that we're doing, developing our heart space, developing our connection to Krishna, to ourselves, and to each other in empathy, joy, and love, and all these various qualities. And this is the process of anartha nivritti. It's an uncomfortable process. It's not always easy. It's actually very challenging sometimes. But it's also a very important part of our journey. And in that sense, Mahaprabhu really came to share this heart with us. It's not about, for him, it wasn't about caste, culture, religion, all of that. It was available to everyone. Everyone could join in, everyone could participate, everyone could partake in developing themselves and developing the relationship with Krishna. It wasn't tied to any particular group. And that was very revolutionary, especially at that time. We look at the caste situation and so many different things in the interreligious situation at that time. And even before that time. And he came to share the heart of the spiritual path, which is bhakti. It's greater than just intellect. It's greater than just the body. But it's really the heart. Are we developing our heart, our spiritual identity as a servitor of Krishna and also every living being as well? And lastly, just saying that developing these qualities, Srila Prabhupada mentions this point. I really like this. He uses this word in the purport that we can become like the glowing sun with the shining rays of light, like Vasudeva and Devaki. He mentions that because Vasudeva and Devaki they're holding Krishna in their heart, they became like a glowing sun. And I was thinking how wonderful if we can work on developing these qualities. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes practice, and developing, again, this relationship, this heart-to-heart relationship, we can also become like a glowing sun with shining rays. And these shining rays can be shining rays of hope, of compassion, of love, of connection, of shelter, of safety in the world where we really need it. We look around this world, we see, even with the situation going on, there's many people suffering, even in our own communities. So how can we be instruments of that, of that, and become glowing suns of light and shining rays of hope? So I want to end there. I know we talked about many different points, but I hope those were clear. Any questions, any comments, any reflections, I'm open to hearing. And I see the chat is also very full, which is a good thing. That's always a good thing. wanted to open up there. Haribol, thank you everyone for listening and for giving me your attention. Thank you.
Hey, Krishna, Vinajaya.
Haribol.
Very well, thank you so much for another wonderful class. I just couldn't write fast enough, and I was thinking this is the fastest class ever. I can't believe it's ending. There's so much more I wanted you to talk about, and I'm going to keep up with Bhakti Center to get you on a longer thing. But there's so many points. But one of the things that you said early on, and that you talked about, is that the heart is the deepest part of the mind, and I love that. And those verses from the Bhagavad Gita, 13:8-12, that you're, those are some of my favorite verses about what is true knowledge. And the point about, in my book, we're reading the Sri Upanishad, and you're just one of the mantras that talks about what is true education. It's not an education that, like you're saying, of the mind, of the body, but of the heart. And it was such a beautiful point. And I was thinking, Katavata has a little skinny book that he wrote, I think, with his students. And there's one meditation he has for Diwali. And in it, he writes, the heart is the heart is the place where we keep that which we treasure the most.
Yes.
And it was just making me think so much of that. So, and I'm even wearing my shirt that has a little heart. Coincidentally today. So thank you so much for this heart-centered class. It was just so beautiful, and I pray you'll be back with us again and give us longer offerings because it was just awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It always means so much coming from you. And like I said this before, Jamuna Jai Prabhu, and for those of you who know her, she embodies these qualities, these heart-centered qualities. We know this, we see this, so thank you for being a model for us. Thank you. And thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that very much. And you're totally right. The heart holds our deepest values, our deepest experiences, and our deep vulnerability, actually. And that's where we're not able to access that because sometimes we're a little blocked from it. But I think that the process in our spiritual path is also to access that, very much so, because that's where our connection to each other and Krishna comes from that area, that space. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions?
We have a question in the chat, Anuj Prabhu, from Venetia. She asks, what do you recommend for cultivating our heart space?
Thank you for that question. There's many things, but we have even just in our practice, we have many different ways we can do that. One is our sadhana. We have that. And coming to it from a place of prayer, not just mechanically. And this is challenging because when we're doing it day in and day out, it can become a little mechanical. So if we have our meditation practice, our japa practice, we can bring a more prayerful mood to that, our feeling to that. And there's different books that are written on that as well. Some really nice ones. Sachinanda Swami has The Living Name, which is a wonderful book on bringing a more prayerful mood. And there's also many other different books too, to our sadhana. And even when we're serving, again, bringing that mood of prayer, of connection, of compassion. And I think that there's also opportunities. There's our individual practice, but then there's our group practice in the world. So we have our private practice, which is our sadhana, which is our own individual prayer and whatnot. And we can have different practices. Also, journaling is really helpful. Praying is really helpful as well. There's so many different things we can do. Then we also have our service externally in the world. So if we can see the pain that's in the world, there's so much pain actually if we look around. It can be overwhelming, but actually can soften our heart when we see it. When we first think of it, we can be a little overwhelming, but as practicing spiritualists, we can see the pain and see what can we do about it. How can we help? And see that there's people suffering. And we also are all suffering in one way or another. And having that compassion, that expands our heart space. Meditating on that. Actively witnessing it and partaking in it is actually powerful. And then saying, what can we do locally to help? I know in New York, we have this wonderful program, Interfaith program where meals are offered, and we have Adi Purush Prabhu on as well, where they offer meals to folks who need it across New York City. What a wonderful way to connect with people and serve them from a place of compassion, giving them a warm, nourishing, nutritious meal, prasad. It's a wonderful way. And so there's a balance between our individual practice and what we're feeling and cultivating, again, through our sadhana. Can do it from prayer, might be adding in journaling, might be whatever we're doing. And then also seeing how we can be of service in the world, whether it's in our local community, our spiritual community, our temple, whatever the case might be, where we can add and help. And that is what we can do and grow from there. Hope that answered your question. Paid promotion, absolutely. New York Interfaith Meals Distribution on Instagram.
Bhima Prabhu has his hands up.
Hari Hari, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, Hari Bol Prabhu,
Hari.
such a wonderful class. Two points. One is Krishna is a Chinta Shakti. One, sometimes we hear in classes, Prabhupada's books, how Radharani loves Krishna more and more every day, and Krishna becomes more and more beautiful. Radharani makes a brand new, it never serves the same meal twice for eternity, etc. It's inconceivable. But I have noticed that in these Bhakti Center morning Bhagavatam classes, that the same is holding true for all these classes, is that every day, not only are they different, but they seem, at least as we grow in the Bhagavatam, coming to the 10th canto, the intimacy, the face of Krishna, that we are growing more and more closer to Krishna, and it just doesn't end. And I would just like to thank you for such a wonderful, clear, lucid, simple class that focused on the most important aspect of Bhakti Yoga, of Krishna consciousness, of the love that Prabhupada showed to us, and that is that we share that love with others. And just as part of the paid announcement for Adi Purush's program, we always have to remember that Adi Purush's program is not too unlike the yoga classes that are given at the Bhakti Center. It's bringing people close to devotees with association. These people may not know what they're coming close to, what they're slowly being introduced to. You're getting them in the room of bhakti, and therefore they are seeing the deity, or they are learning initial fundamental aspects of bhakti yoga. And there's a shirt that, of course, that Adi Purush gives out, and that I think is what your class is all about. Which is, and of course, it's a song, a beautiful song by the Beatles at a time when they were hanging with Srila Prabhupada, which is all you need is love. And so with that, I would just like to say Hare Krishna and thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the encouragement and also appreciating the community. That is totally accurate. And one of the wonderful things you talked about, Radharani cooking a meal, and you talked about the devotees coming in and sharing classes and unique classes. One of the things I so much appreciate about our spiritual path is the encouragement of the uniqueness. We actually all are unique contributors, and the idea is not that we just merge into this one bland concoction that we're all sharing the same thing, but that we all have our unique talents, gifts, and perspectives. And we can bring that when it comes to our perspective, even on practicing bhakti and how we do that. So that is such a beautiful thing in our path, that we can appreciate all of our different strengths, our gifts, and whatnot. And when you were sharing, you reminded me of that, the fact that and I was trying to make this point, and I hope I made it clear enough, but it's coming to me again, that Srila Prabhupada mentions the word Dhamma in the purport. And we think of Dham as Vrindavan Dham, Mayapur, we have different Dhams, places of pilgrimage. But actually, he mentions that wherever the Supreme Personality appears is a Dhamma. And we can actually, this is the goal, to cultivate a space that Krishna can appear. And Vasudeva and Devaki are showing us the way. They've cultivated a space in their heart where Krishna can appear. And so it's not that we have to, that's why they say that Vrindavan is in the heart of devotee. It's not just a place, but it's also an emotional place. It's a spiritual place that can be found. We have an opportunity to cultivate that in our own life.
Hare Krishna, Anuj, Sharma Prabhu. I just quickly wanted to again appreciate you, because a lot of the terms that you used are things that are coming up in my life right now. Like I'm actually reading the book Wise Love by Pranata Kumtoy, which I mentioned in the chat. And you used the term wise love. I'm leading a Spanish speakers women's group where we're reading the book in Spanish. And a lot of these ideas are coming up, and it's interesting when you start doing this bhakti practice, how Krishna will talk to you from lots of different people, and things will come up in classes that you're dealing with right now. And one of the things that came up for me during your talk is the idea that loving relationships are our safety net. And those are loving relationships with any living being. So like Bhima Prabhu was joking in the chat. He's like, well, I hang out with horses and dogs. So like, what am I? And it's like, well, they're very loyal. They're very loving. That unconditional love from an animal, that's just as valid, that loving relationship. And then you have the loving relationship with the devotees. You have a loving relationship with others who may not think of themselves as devotees, but they are, because Krishna is still in their heart. And if they're having loving relationships with you, that's a type of kind of subtle service that they're doing. And then there's the loving relationship with Krishna and with our deities and that kind of spiritual. So that was what really kept resonating for me, is that loving relationships are a safety net. And I'm embarrassed to share, but I sometimes try to write poetry. And just yesterday, I kind of came out of my comfort zone and I wrote a haiku. And it feels like it's so appropriate. And I truly apologize to everyone, but it just feels like it's Krishna talking about this. So what I wrote was, look for joy, my friend, not in your head, but in your heart. You'll find the source. And it felt like that was your class. And I was just like, oh, okay. I couldn't figure out how to share it privately. So I'm kind of embarrassing myself and sharing it this way, but it just felt so much. So thank you so much. And please come again.
Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. And that is absolutely correct. Wise love. I've read portions of that book. I think that's exactly what bhakti is. It's philosophical grounding so that we have a certain maturity, but also we know that love is the essence, and the heart is the essence of the path. And so it gives maturity to our expression of love. Again, love without wisdom becomes very sentimental, but to your point, that is very true. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And absolutely, our Sangha is our safety net. That's what we have. And I think that I've also been reflecting on the fact that Sangha and our loving relationships are really the form, it's really how Krishna shows his love toward us, actually. And that's the expression of it. Sometimes we miss it if we're not looking carefully enough, we're not being mindful enough. But this is actually how Krishna shows us our love, and it's very important that we take care of that and treasure that, very much so.
Yeah, look for joy, my friend, not in this world, but in Anuj Sharma Prabhu's spoken word.
Thank you, Prabhu. I appreciate your humor always.
Yeah, great class. Adipusha Prabhu, would you like to contribute? Would you like to glorify Krishna? Preferably in poetic, in meter. Put it in meter.
How wonderful is Krishna. Yeah, Krishna is giving us this access. Krishna is so wonderful. And the girl was asking, well, how do you cultivate this love? It's important to have that quality. And what does Scripture say? It says, one who has full faith in Guru, like Prabhu mentioned, and Krishna, and is engaged in service, all the good qualities are manifest. You don't have to, by the sadhana, by the service, with some of the self-help programs, they say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, try that. It doesn't work. It's not exactly a self-help program, although it is self-help. What we do is we follow the instructions of the spiritual master, and everything else is accomplished by that. Seek first the kingdom of God, all else will follow. So we have our gurus, Shiksha and Diksha, offering their example and their instruction, and we just take it up with full confidence that everything will be there. How wonderful is Krishna? How wonderful is Krishna? We're here in the Bhagavatam class to glorify the Lord. We'll glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you. Okay, Prabhu. So I think we're at time. And on behalf of Prabhu, is that right?
Yeah.
We're wrapping up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Say your punchline, Sharma Prabhu.
No punchline. I'm just happy to be here. And the point of really this, if there's one thing I want all of us to take away, is to continue to cultivate these qualities. And we have an opportunity, just like I mentioned, Vasudeva and Devaki, there's an example given of them and how they're inviting Krishna into their life. And we can also try to do the same thing. And we're not maybe at that level, but we can learn and we can start to gradually build this capacity and go from there. Thank you. Thank you all.
Nice, wonderful. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Anuj Prabhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, dear devotees. Search for joy in the right place, which is here in your heart, like Anuj Sharma Prabhu guided us today. Thank you. Hare Krishna.